My name is Rich Schmidt. I'm here with Alexis Harrington. It's February 12th, 2025. We're at the Nicholson Library at Linfield University in McMinnville. And Alexis, thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you. It's an honor that y'all brought me on to have this interview.
Excellent. First question, why wine?
Why wine? Okay, so that's a great question. My background is in restaurants. I've been enamored with hospitality my entire life. I think that comes from, I have a family of a lot of very hospitable women in my life. My mom, my grandma, my aunt, and all my aunts, and it's always been something I've been drawn to. I got into restaurants when I was 14, and I've been working in restaurants ever since. I have a culinary degree from the Culinary Institute of America, and that was kind of my first exposure to wine as an 18-year-old. So I was exposed as an 18-year-old gets. You know, there's not a lot of exposure in the United States that an 18-year-old gets in a legal sense. But we had a wine class there, and it's known to be one of the most difficult classes at the culinary. And I did very well. That was like the first hint that I might be good at this. I tasted very well, and I was very drawn to the catalogical information and all of the nuance of terroir and certain grapes grow here better when these grapes taste like this. As much base information as an 18-year-old American gets about wine, right? But I continued to work in the back of house until I was 21. I was working in Washington D.C. at the time. And I remember just being very broke and living in a very expensive, really crappy studio apartment in Silver Spring, and I was making $13.20 an hour as a back of house employee, and I could barely afford anything. And I split my rent with a roommate, and I remember seeing these servers who were all kind of laissez-faire is a very podcast-safe word for that. And I remember them, they would come in, they would smell good, they would work 4 hours and leave with pocketfuls of cash, like 3 or 4 times the amount of money that I made in that day. And I'm just like, I'm 20 years old, I'm sweaty, I'm gross. At the time I was so stressed out, I was smoking cigarettes. It was not a healthy state of mind. And I'm like, I want to do what those guys do, but I'm going to bring all of my, passion for food and harmony and delivering the experience. And then I'm also I think I can do the wine thing too. So when I turned 21 is when I switched to the front of house. I became a sommelier. And I was working at a Rhine bar in Glover Park, and I was working with a couple of really cool people there who taught me how to manage wine lists. We really started tasting wines. I got into some tasting groups in DC, and I became a certified sommelier at 22. I was freshly 22, and I really loved the camaraderie of being around, people, like-minded people who really loved wine. I really loved delivering an experience, and I became very good at serving tables, in a sense. And I quickly kind of transitioned to just doing fine dining. And my fine dining, both serving, bartending, and management. I'm also a very good bartender, and I learned to bartend at some kind of more high-end cocktail restaurants in Washington D.C. that have since closed, as restaurants do, especially in it's been 10 years. But so I ended up coming back to Ohio. It's where I'm from, just south of Detroit, Michigan, in Toledo. And because I couldn't afford to live in DC anymore, and I was offered this house to rent in Ohio that was on an acre of land, a 3-bedroom house, $800 a month, that I shared with my roommate. So $400 a month. I had 2 dogs. This was great, and I could make my rent in one night. I was working as a somm. at the steakhouse at the casino in Toledo, and there was also another steakhouse on the waterfront there that I worked as a sommelier, and I really liked working fine dining. But in 2018, I was offered a position. I kind of applied via Guild Somm to work a harvest, and I thought, well, this is the next step, right? If I want to get better at wine, I have to learn how it's made. And Claire Giroux from Brooks reached out to me and offered me a harvest position, and I was ecstatic. This is my first time to get really into the wine industry. And until this point, I really had, as a certified somm, freshly minted, I really had a very kind of surface level knowledge of how deep the wine industry goes. I knew as much as a steakhouse somm should know. I understood wine pairings. I understood basic global wine law. And I knew it got really, really deep, but I was doing a tasting group in Ohio, and I just wanted to get a little deeper. I came out and I did a harvest, and it was really eye-opening, oh, this is the wine industry. This isn't hospitality industry, wine department. This is the wine industry. And I fell in love with Oregon as soon as I came out here. I remember as soon as the wheels hit the tarmac and I saw all the lush green around me. It was a beautiful September 15th, 2018. It was a beautiful sunny day. Claire Giroux picks me up and I'm just slack-jawed in the car, and she's pointing out all of oh, there's the Yosemite Hills, those are the Dundee Hills, that's Chehalem, as we're driving through. And I'm just slack-jawed oh my God, it's so lush and green, and it's beautiful here. Until that point, I've been in one vineyard my entire life, and it was in Maryland. And shout out to my Maryland friends. But it wasn't wine country, and I always liked light-bodied reds and Rieslings, and those are kind of what I was drawn to. So the opportunity to work at Brooks was incredible, and I did harvest there. And then the following year I did harvest in 2019 and in France, and I worked at Domaine Lateau, which is a natural winery in the Loire, and then I did a beautiful harvest in the Jurassien, working for Jamie and Jessica Hutchinson for Domaine Lateau when we made Petit Mont Sec, a very little project, and I learned a lot. And when I did harvest in 2018, I came from that harvest saying oh, I don't want to be a winemaker. I don't want to work in the cellar. I was sore for months from the punch downs and the monotony, and harvest is rough time for us all, And by the time a couple months passed, and I was just kind of hanging out in tasting rooms, and it's just getting my I ended up moving out here actually at the beginning of 2019. I forgot to mention, and I was just kind of getting a hand for the Willamette Valley because I was going to try and make it in the Oregon wine industry as a 23-year-old somm. And I was offered to do harvest in France. I've never been in France before. I'm well, it looks like I'm doing another harvest. And it was in France that I fell in love with the winemaking again and really understanding a sense of place. I think it always... everything that why wine? I think it's the epitome of a sense of place. It really is a very transparent, almost transaction that we have with the land, and it's a snapshot into time and history and a people, and a specific place. It's like a time capsule, and that's what I love about wine, and that's the kind of wine that I want to make. And even when I was in culinary arts, we were talking about slow food. We talk about, as local ingredients as you can, and working with farmers. And that's what the Willamette Valley is about. And that's what I love about life. And so that was a very easy transition to me. Oh no, this is where I belong. And because wine is that you're working with a farm and you're working with a vineyard, and it's a snapshot of people. That's why wine. I realize I also gave a large biography.
Perfect. That's the goal of that question. So before we get to the Oregon part of your life, let's talk a bit about kind of the restaurant and the somm part of your life.
Yeah.
So obviously you said growing up, working in restaurants from a young age. what was it that prompted you to do the sommelier track? You mentioned obviously wine was of interest to you. What prompted you to go down the line of formal wine education?
Well, when you are a 21-year-old person in a very, very highly competitive market, for anyone to, and it was my belief, for anyone to take you seriously, especially when it comes to wine, is you had to have those certifications. You know, I would be hesitant to hire a 21-year-old as a som. In many of my beverage programs I've hired. But if they had, they're a certified som on paper, and I ask them like some questions, then it instills a lot more trust. For me, it was because I am a go-getter. I've always been a hustler, and I wanted a big boy job or big girl job. I wanted to be able to make a living in the wine industry, and I wanted it now. So I studied hard, and I was managing wine programs at 23, 24, 25 years old. At 26, I was general manager of some of the restaurants at the Bruce Carey Restaurant Group up here in Portland. I was managing a wine list at 23 Hoyt. I was helping with the beverage program at Clark Lewis, and I have been in a constant state of study since I was 20 years old when I started studying for my intro. It's the people and the connections that you make. It's, you study with a group of people, so you grow with people. It's the community that you have, and it's constantly evolving. Every day I look at the wine industry, and there's something like even more that I haven't even considered before. There's such a vastness to this that because it's history, geography, it's organoleptic experiences, but it's also building an experience. It's hospitality. It's also working with farmers. There's a lot to this that I just really admire, and that was why I chose the som track. Working in the wine industry rather than the hospitality industry, I transitioned out of working in restaurants in 2022 to fully focus on my winemaking project that I was doing part-time since 2020 basically. It made more sense to go the WSET route. And so I got my WSET diploma in 21 or 22. I was accepted as a student of the Masters of Wine program in last year. Was my first year in that, and I'm doing it again this year. It's my second attempt to take the S1, which is really exciting. And talk about studying. That's a lot of study, and I love doing it. I have a great tasting room, and I think what I've loved most about my transition from CMS to the Masters of Wine is someone said it really well. Like the CMS, you're like an investigator. You have to search out all of the details. But and the Masters of Wine are a little bit more like you're the prosecutor. You have to convince people, and you have to argue it like a lawyer. And I love having that really broad and critical analysis of the wine industry as a global system. Is what I really love about the Masters of Wine, and the WSET, starts and gets you going in that direction too, and gives you a really good understanding and a broad understanding of all your theory. Is kind of the building blocks you need for the CMS. The Masters of Wine. I guess you could say. I don't want to say I'm an academic because I'm not. I'm not in I never went to a university. I went to the Culinary Institute of America. I have a 2-year degree, but I go to the School of Hard Knocks. And if I want to learn something, I go find someone and I get a book and I just consume it. And I sometimes it feels like I'm winging it, and other times it feels like I'm incredibly disciplined. So, it depends on the day. But yeah.
Let's talk about the restaurant management and wine management part of your life. I'm curious about, you mentioned kind of learning from others how to build a wine list, how to manage a wine list.
Yeah.
Tell me about what you learned and how you sort of put that into practice when you're building a wine program or taking over an existing wine program. What are the most important things for you, and what do you want your wine list to be? What do you want it to showcase?
I wish I could tell you it was really romantic. The biggest thing about taking over a wine list or building a wine list is politics, and you want to make sure that you're working the wine makes sense for your staff. You want to make sure that the wine makes sense in costs. You want to make sure that the wines that you're using make sense for your program. Mm-hmm. You know, if I wanted to build a wine list that was all, the most beautiful sense of place and typical varieties of the entire world globally, and all of my glass pours would be, $17 to $30 a glass, it would not make a lot of sense in a lot of restaurant settings. So and although that's like my dream list, it is a highly curated and beautiful list that transparently expresses a sense of place. That's my dream. But when you're managing restaurants, especially depending on like the scale of the restaurant and how much business you're doing, and even the kind of food you're serving, and the skill set of your servers, as much as I invest into education, there's a lot to managing restaurants and wine bars and beverage lists. So you have to work within the confines of the restaurant, and that includes the people, the owners, your other managers, and your staff. So I would say politics is probably the most important thing about managing a wine list and managing restaurants, but also it's also making that connection with your consumers and making that connection with your guests. What wine makes sense for them? What wine do they like to drink? And what are they coming in here looking for? And it's identifying your guests and identifying what wine makes sense with the food that you're serving as well. Restaurants, most people go to restaurants that they want to eat. So working with the chef is also very important, making sure that the wine makes sense with the cuisines that you're working with, and pairing and accessibility. You don't want to put a super highly allocated, wine that you only get like 3 cases of on your glass pour list. If you see over 100 people a day, that's not really conducive to a successful wine list. So there's a lot of logistics too. And I think also like it's the relationships that you have with your people, your distributors. Build those relationships, and you can get some really, really awesome wines that do express a sense of place, and that are made in large quantities. You just have to kind of search those out and build relationships with people. And I think that it all goes down to those relationships that you have. But if I had like my dream wine list, it would be really, really fantastic value, transparent senses, wines with a transparent sense of place. That would be my ethos, so to speak.
So I think that starts to answer my next question for you, but I'm going to ask it anyway. So as you were learning about wine, both in a consumer setting and in a more educational setting, what wines were you being drawn to? What excited you about the world of wine? People ask this question, what's your favorite wine? All the time. It changes all the time for me. What draws me to the wine world, I think, as an overarching sense, is, like I said, it's a transparent sense of place. You can visit, the beaches in Marquay just by drinking a beautiful crisp Radicchio. You could also, we're talking about Petit Saint-Manseng. You could visit the rolling hills in that Béarn, south of Bayonne country, say having something that's only really grown in that region, Petit Manseng, or the uniqueness of different varieties and the history. I'm a big Alsace dork. Talk about rich history in the land. It's the same thing with Champagne, but it's not for the sex appeal of champagne, it's for the history of champagne. I'm a really big dork about that kind of stuff. And the wines with the story, those are what I'm drawn to, I think. Also wines that taste good, you know. All wine tastes good, depending on the setting, right? There's a wine for everything. But you know, the wines I think I'm drawn to earlier in my career was I've always been drawn to light-bodied reds, aromatic reds, you know, Pinot Noir. I've always been drawn to Riesling. I've always been drawn to Chardonnay. In every iteration of Chardonnay, everything from California, oaky, buttery, 90s style California to new age California where there's like this rich and saline kind of a little bit more acid driven. You know, we love to bash California wine here in Oregon, but there's beautiful, beautiful wines all over Oregon and California. And there is Oregon Chardonnay is really profound to me. I've had some of the best Chardonnays in the world are made right here in Oregon, and I'm a very big believer in that. And of course, the white Burgundies, Chablaisian wines. I've had Chardonnay grown in beautiful Chardonnays in the Adelaide Hills, and Patagonian Chardonnays, and beautiful styles from Elgin. And you know, there's just the vastness of the wine world. It's just so hard to pinpoint what I'm drinking now. Santa Barbara Syrah, Rocks District Syrah, La Carima from Marque. Those are my aromatic reds that I have in my house. I'm drinking Oregon Riesling and Oregon Chardonnay when I can afford it. So more on the Oregon Riesling probably. I drink a lot of the wine I make. And I always like French cremants, champagnes, obviously. I don't think anyone's ever said, oh, actually, I don't like Cremant. That's crazy. So, you know, like, but that changes. It's a very nebulous.
So tell me about, let's talk about your first harvest. You mentioned like you had this knowledge of wine, more than most people will ever have in their life, but you had no production knowledge at that point. So tell me about that step for you. What were you expecting your first harvest to be like, and what was it actually like?
It would be easier. I think I know I was going into it expecting just to work myself to death, and I'm like, that's not an issue. I work myself to death in restaurants all the time. Like, my goodness. I work 80 hours a week, no sweat. It was different. It was a lot more physical, but it was also a lot of, you know, harvest. There's a lot of emotions during harvest. There's, you get really close with the crew. I wasn't expecting to get so close with these people. You know, we're all still friends. We all still talk. I wasn't expecting to making lifelong friendships. I also thought I knew a lot about wine. And I got there and I was like, wow, I don't know shit about wine. I say this to myself like several times a month, even to this day. Like, I was like, I think I know a lot about wine, and ooh, I don't know anything. But that's just me. You know, you always got to stay humble. You're always a student, you know. But I thought I knew a lot about wine, and I didn't know anything about wine. And so it was a really humbling experience as well. And I tried to soak in everything. There's only so much about the winemaking process that you can learn during harvest. A lot of it happens after harvest is over. A lot of the actual winemaking happens after the harvest is over, you know, after the primary fermentation is fairly easy to manage, except, you know, the scale is always really difficult, but like, you know, it's producing CO2, it's pretty protected, it's good. So a lot of the actual winemaking happens like after harvest is when you got to be a lot more careful. That's when you need more of a thoughtful winemaker hand, and so I craved that. I had an awesome harvest experience at Brooks. It was super cool, and the people there have always been generous and lots of hospitality. My boyfriend at the time, fiance now, His family purchased Vitae Springs in 2018. And 2019, they did their first harvest. Of course, I was in France at this time. So I kind of came on. 2020 was a little bit of a wash, to say this the least, and for lots of reasons. It's crazy. People are like, "Oh, something happened in 2020." People who aren't in the wine industry are like, "I wonder what happened in 2020" as a joke, and I'm like, the wildfires. But no, there was a pandemic too. That I always forget about the pandemic. I'm always like, "Oh my God, the wildfires." Anyway, so it's just a double whammy of a year. Yeah, and so I kind of came on as a winemaker in 21, helping Randy out, my fiance, soon to be husband. I guess that's what fiance means. I'm just very excited. It's been a while. Helping him make the wine. We make the wines together. But that's also the year I'm already making wine at a commercial scale. I'm gonna start my own project too. What's another couple barrels? Or 4 barrels. So 21 was the first year we kind of started scaling up. 22 was actually, I would say, the actual first year we started scaling up. We went from probably about 400 or 500 cases to a little over 1,000 cases. And then 24, this year we made just around 2,000 cases, and I am at maximum capacity for what we can do. We were making our wines at Keeler, and now we are making our wines at Vitae Springs, which is really cool. We have a 3-bay garage that we converted into a winery. It was all actually grandfathered in, bonded by the original owners, and we made it work. And we have awesome state-of-the-art equipment that we got secondhand from a lot of amazing professionals in amazing wineries, and we're making it happen. And the wines are the best quality now because I pick them there and they get pressed here, and there's little transference, and the wines are just so fresh and expressive of a sense of place. And making estate wines is really, really exciting for Vitae Springs.
What prompted the purchase? Was it something that had been planned, or was it something that just sort of happened?
That's a whole other thing. From what I understand, it's my in-laws, right? One only understands their in-laws so much, but Britt and Kay, my mother and father, soon to be in-law, they were looking to purchase some land with the idea that they're going to retire. Britt loves the wine industry, and so did his son Randy, and they were really, really excited about it. They were very close friends with Janie Brooks. They went on a couple tours. Randy would also be an awesome person for you to interview. He was doing lots of harvest out in France before he was 21. He was working in Beaujolais and Alsace, and then he came out here, and Janie Brooks hired him for a full year for an internship, and he really cut his teeth at Brooks. And Kay, my mother-in-law, she she grew up on a farm, and she wanted to retire. And they also lived here when in their youth. They lived out here in Vancouver, Washington, and they really wanted to have a space out here. They're actually from Texas, and she snowbirds out back and forth, and Britt's going to retire soon, so they'll be coming back and forth. But they wanted some place out here. They wanted their slice of the Pacific Northwest. Don't we all? And so the caveat was, all right, they had this proposal for Randy, you want to learn how to do vineyard, because Randy's always been his attraction to the wine industry is very much the land. He wanted to be a farmer. He wanted to learn viticulture, and his harvest, I wouldn't say he did a lot of harvest, but he worked for wineries and vineyards out in France, and that's where his main focus is. And he's very, very passionate about regenerative agriculture and rebuilding soil. And so the opportunity was, okay, we're going to purchase this little vineyard because this is our slice of the Pacific Northwest, but it has a vineyard on it. And if we buy this, you have to farm it.
And Randy was like, yeah, deal, no problem. As at 23. So Randy became the vineyard manager at 23 for Vitae Springs, and he was working with the original owners, Joel Van Volkenberg, for the first year of it. But Randy also went to the School of Hard Knocks, and he's done an incredible job. We have since converted it to organic. We're introducing animals to the property, and we have done an incredible, monumentous amount of work to rebuild the soil there. Not saying that the Van Volkenbergs took bad care of it, because it was a beautiful property, but it was farmed conventionally, live certified. But Randy wanted to do something that was deeper and had more of a sense of longevity, and build and preserve the legacy of Vitae Springs. It's a 50-year-old self-rooted vineyard, and it's half of it. The other half was planted in the late '90s on rootstock. But like, there's a historic significance, and these vines have a lot of wisdom and spirit, and there's a duty that we have to keep them alive. We're not no phylloxera. They're no disease. We don't have any trunk disease. They're just old and spirited, and we have a duty to take care of these vines. So that's kind of where we're at with Vitae Springs, and how that transition happened. I was just along for the ride, which is great. I really wanted to be hands off and have them kind of figure out for the first couple years, 18, 19, and 20. And then 21 was when we were a little bit more established. I knew a lot more about winemaking and the wine industry. And because like I said, I get up and I study, I go to work, come home, shower, study, sleep for the past however many years. And so I knew a little bit more about it, and I'm like, we can do this together, and we can make really high quality wines if we work together. And so they brought me on as the winemaker for that project, and I also started Amica Luna, which is really exciting. And the wines I always surprise myself. The wines are really high quality, and I'm really, really excited about this project. It really shows the wines are transparent, of a sense of place, but they're also just really beautiful and opulent and ageable. We build wines for longevity and texture. All of our reds are unfined and unfiltered. The only whites, the Chardonnays are unfined and unfiltered. And then we do some light filtering on the wines with malic, and sugar, obviously. But we really try and leave as much in the bottle as possible. We're low intervention. We don't use a lot of sulfur. We use enough to stabilize the wines, make them fresh. But we work with really high acid wines, so like with pHs of like anywhere from 2.9 to the Riesling, which is crazy, to like 3.5 on my Pinot Gris. And everything else is between those, so I don't have to use a lot of sulfur anyway. So the wines are really beautiful, acid-driven, and filigreed. They're detailed, and especially the Pinots. They're very long aged. I'm hoping that they'll last decades.
So tell me about the first vintage there where you were involved, and you mentioned kind of as a group project, working with others. But someone has to make the decisions on picks, and someone has to make the decisions on all the little things along the way. So tell me about being in charge or making those calls.
So like I said, I make the wines with Randy, but when it comes to, and this is how we usually divide it up, because Randy and I have kind of different philosophies. He's a little bit more hands-off and dreamy, and I can be very strict and regimented. So we have to really balance each other out. Otherwise, our wines would be chaotic. And we turn that chaos and we make beautiful wines together. And it's because we both kind of pull on each other's weaknesses and strengths. I make the picking decisions when I can, unless I work with him. He's my fiance husband. And so I'll be like, I want to pick here. And then the logistics are like, well, I can't get a cruder here. And I'm like, well, does it make sense to pick actually here? The rains are coming here. So we work together, but I think ultimately I make the picking decision. And then with Amica Luna, I do that all, myself, and I do all the picking and calls for there. And it's also like my way of being independent of Vitae Springs too, so I can have a little bit of autonomy there, which is good for balance. As far as and I do all of the additions, and I work with most of the lab equipment, and I'm the one who kind of chemically analyzes the wine and sensorily. Whatever. I'm the one who analyzes the wine organoleptically, and I make calls on the winemaking process, temperature, and élevage, any additions like so. As far as those decisions goes, those are on me. I don't make. I try and give suggestions in the vineyard, but the vineyard's is all Randy. And as far as like in the cellar goes, Randy is really there, and he helps me a lot as like kind of like in an assistant winemaker, cellar master way. But it's also much more than that. We do everything together. So. But it's really great that I can delegate to him, these 3 barrels need this, and I need you to check on this barrel, and, check the DO on that wine, and I can trust him to do it, and he'll do it with mastery. And he can also do it with managing me, which is great. And that what more can you ask in a partner? So it's very much like a co-situation. But at the end of the day, I'm the one who, kind of critically analyzes the wine in the place we're at in harvest and making the final decision.
How have the wines changed in the time you've been making them?
That's a great question. Both in the scale and how much wine we're making. And Randy and I are like really trying to see like how much wine can him and I actually manage, which is great. The Pinot Noirs since I came on have shown a lot more density and concentration. The 2019 Pinot Noirs that Randy made are actually beautiful, though. They're a little bit more lighter and filigreed. And he did 100% whole cluster on one that took some time to come around, but they're actually like my favorite wines, my favorite Pinots in the cellar right now. Wine's can be very like nebulous and wavy on like which wines are showing really well right now. Like the 22s, people are like, oh, these are great. I'm like, oh, they're really young. So it's like I am my worst critic, and I'm probably unjustifiably hard on all the wines, but I strive for perfection, and which is never achievable and kind of toxic. So it's something that we're all working on. But I make the Pinots with a little bit more density and concentration. We are looking to make Pinots that are ageable, which is hard when you're a startup and you only have 2 vintages, 2.5 really, in the cellar, because the wines are, because the wines really, especially because we work in 2023, actually we were 100% whole cluster, and those wines aren't even in bottle yet, but they're going to be really beautiful and just simply unapproachable in their youth. When you're working with Pinot, there's also this, Pinot is so transparent of a sense of place, and you have to try really hard to not overdo your hand. You want to let the Pinot and the fruit, shine. And so with making wines with a lot of texture and longevity and structure, sometimes you can fall away from what is Pinot Noir. So writing that balance is something that I'm working to do every vintage. But I would say that as far as the Pinot Noirs go, that's kind of where I contribute the most. They're my babies in the cellar. I talk to them when I'm doing my punch downs at night.
I'll like whisper to them, which is something psychotic. It's like, please be good. You're going to be great. I believe in you. You're going to taste delicious in 10 years. As far as the white program that goes, we do a lot of things in barrel, both for logistics, and we love the texture. Randy and I are very inspired by Alsace. Him and I have both spent a lot of time out there, and we've both had this beautiful relationship with those wines in that region, and something that we're both drawn to. So we make our Pinot Gris with a lot of texture, a lot of ripeness, and botrytis. We work with a lot of botrytis, so that's something that you have to balance, like how much is too much more botrytis. Is this gray rat or botrytis? So we get botrytis. We're organic, right? And we get botrytis, and we encourage botrytis every year in the whites at Vitae Springs. And so, all of our Rieslings have this beautiful beeswax honey thing going on. But they all have these like insanely grippy acidity or insane mouth-watering acidity, I should say. And it's something that we get really excited about. Also, I came on in 21, right? The only vintage that we've made since I've come on outside of that is 19, and we only made Pinot in 19, and we're still trying to figure out where our wines, what winemaking style makes sense for our wines. We're really trying to dial in what makes sense for our vineyard. Do we use this cooperage or that cooperage? Do we extract it this way? Do we do it that way? How much acacia do we put on this Gruner Veltliner? How long do they be in barrel? Is everything in barrel? I'm noticing as time goes on and we are getting into a rhythm, we're pulling things out of barrel just a couple months sooner. We're bottling the wines when they're ready, which is a luxury that we get by making our wines in house, rather than doing it at custom crush, because then you have to work with 9, 10, 15 other winemakers and their bottling schedules, and harvest is it's only 6 months away, so there's a lot of things, a lot of moving parts, and when you're at your own winery, you don't have to answer to 9 other winemakers' timelines, and that has been very nice. And it's something that I have to constantly remind myself. I'm always in a rush all the time. I'm rushing around, and I'm like, whose schedule am I on? It's my own. It's in my head. I think we all suffer from that, but that's how it reflects me, and my winemaking has become a little bit less hectic and a lot more controlled and detail-oriented and intentional. And I think that's something that, as we grow, as Vitae Springs and as Amica Luna, we're discovering every year. It's really awesome. We could talk about the Eola Springs fruit that I get Chardonnay from there. And I'm going into my 4th year of using this fruit. And this is something as I'm a young winemaker. All of these old hat winemakers will be like, well, yeah, of course. But you can see the singularity of the sense of place. It shines and it's distinctive every single vintage. Even in 22, when there was a bad frost, there was potassium all over the valley. And the wine reads a lot more tropical. There's still this spine of ice-like acidity. Ice isn't acidic, but you know what I'm trying to say. It's very crystalline, and I find that to be very specific to Eola Springs. I also get fruit from Royer, which I can throw a rock and hit my Royer vineyard from my Eola Springs vineyard. Maybe not uphill. Throw a rock from Royer down to Eola Springs. That would be a lot easier. And there's a distinct difference in those two particular terroirs, and they're so beautiful. And I think as we make wine, young winemakers as we are, working with the same sites every year, we're really seeing the evolution of this place. And it's my job to bring a global sense of place to right here at Vitae Springs, and making sure that our wines are not just compared to, how does this wine compare to, you know, any of the other, how does this Pinot Gris compare to all the hundreds of Pinot Gris in the valley? But it's like, how does this Pinot Gris stand up against the global stage of wine? And how we can compare it. Or something that I like to do, and this is the way my brain works, I find a Pinot Gris, or maybe a Chardonnay. I find a Chardonnay out there, I'm like, oh, this is a life-changing bottle of wine. I'll call the winemaker, how did you make this wine? You know, and I've done this to a couple winemakers. Seth Morgan, he got a call from me like 5 years ago. And I'm like, this is the best bottle of Chardonnay I've ever had. How did you make this wine? And he indulged me for a whole afternoon while I asked him 1,000 questions about exactly how he makes his wine. And I wrote it down like a psychopath. And I'm so, to this day, I'm so grateful for his generosity and his knowledge. And winemakers all around the world can be like this. It's harder when you get into some of the bigger wineries. You know, everything gets a little bit proprietary, but you know, you're working with farmers, you're working with winemakers that work with farmers. They're usually really excited to share their knowledge, and so you can really kind of pinpoint your mind on where it stands on the global stage. And reverse engineer a wine and make it. It will always be transparent of a sense of place, but you can still kind of hope that you can mirror a specific style that you think that will be harmonious to your vineyard that you're working with. And that's my goal as a winemaker, is to kind of make that bridge of not showing the winemaker's hand too much, but enough to know that there is an intention of a bridging of a style and expression, if that makes sense.
The wine didn't just make itself. There was an intentionality to it.
Yes, wine does like to make itself, though. Wine also likes to stop making itself sometimes. Sometimes you do need a little extra, little boost, you know. But yeah, I think, you know, the wine doesn't make itself. There is intention there, for sure.
Let's talk about Amica Luna. You mentioned it as kind of a counterpoint to your work at Vitae Springs. So tell us about the genesis of the idea of the name and of what you wanted it to be, how it's different.
So the name comes from, it means friendly moon, or the moon my friend. I'm a stargazer. I've always been a stargazer, and I remember one year I got this like really, really awesome, super high-powered binoculars that I could just like sit on my roof or on my lawn and just like look at the moon. That's just me. But I've always been really drawn to that kind of thing. When I was a child, like a small child, like 4, like, what do you want to be when you grow up? I'm like, an astronaut. And then I was bad at math, so probably not an astronaut. But I've always been drawn to that, so that's where the name comes from. Amica Luna comes from this sense of trying to look at the Willamette Valley through the lens of Chardonnay. A lot of winemakers will tell you, well, Chardonnay's a winemaker's grape. You know, you can make it into anything you want. I want to make Chardonnay that shows terroir. And a lot of people will tell me that is, that's an oxymoron. So I make barrel-aged Chardonnay, I make black Chardonnay. I don't, at least for the vintages that I've released, I didn't add sulfur until after malolactic's finished. I've reeled that back a little bit, you know. I still want to make something that Seth told me was, you know, he doesn't abide by a singular philosophy. He does what the wine tells him to do, and he does what's best for the wine. And that, I didn't really get that until this year, 24, when I had some problems in 23, and because I was sticking to this black Chardonnay thing. And I had some problems with that. And so I'm like, this makes a lot more sense. I didn't listen to the wine and see what it needed. I was abiding by the singular philosophy that I was going to make wine in this way. And turns out that's not how wine's made. Learn something all the time. You have to be really flexible. You have to listen. You have to look. You have to be aware of the changes, and you have to pivot, and you have to work with it, and you have to be on top of it. Every winemaker will tell you that. But it's not something that I really understood until probably my 4th year, when everything that I knew about winemaking and it wasn't working. I was like, why is this not working? And you just have to pivot. So Amica Luna. So a lot of people have these like moments. People in the wine industry. A really great question people like to ask you in interviews is, what's a wine that you had that was like the aha moment? I have a lot of those moments all the time. Because, wine can be very moving. And I started having these aha moments about Oregon Chardonnay a lot. And I'm like, this is some of the most profoundly moving wine from winemakers that are effectively in my backyard. What is going on here? I started to get very excited about Chardonnay. The industry is starting to get really excited. People are ripping out Pinot, planting Chardonnay. Chardonnay's hard to come by. Chardonnay's really expensive now. And people are getting really excited about Chardonnay. I mean, fruit cost, bottle cost too. Everything's getting really expensive. And I wanted to jump on this. I wanted to have an opportunity to experience the excitement of Chardonnay. Now, there is no Chardonnay, it's Vitae Springs, because it's old vine Germanic varieties. And so something I wanted to do, and I also wanted it for myself. I didn't want to ride on the coattails of my super generous in-laws. I wanted something for myself too, and I wanted to show that, this is my voice. And this is what I'm excited about. Not that I'm not excited about Vitae Springs, because that is a super awesome, exciting project. But I'm also very excited about Chardonnay. So it's kind of like the sister brand. While Vitae Springs is looking inward at the soil and the regeneration in the property. It's always a state. For the time being and for the foreseeable future, it'll always just be a state. But Amica Luna looks outward. And it is more of, like I said, trying to discover a sense of place in the Willamette Valley with Chardonnay. And I seek to make Chardonnay that is evident of terroir. I try not to be too heavy-handed. Like I said, I don't add lots of sulfur. And I do everything in barrel. But a lot of people can't tell that it's all barrel fermented, and I use upwards of 50% new French oak on some of my wines. I usually write about 20. That's usually good. 20% new French oak is good. But they're all very acid-driven and kind of linear. And I'm searching for like this sense of singularity and precision in Chardonnay. And I think that is evident in a lot of people's Chardonnays in the valley. We were mentioning like a Rabelais. He does a really, really good expression. But there's Chardonnays. I think the first one that I was like really moved by was like the 00. I was the general manager at the Joel Palmer House for a short bit, and I was able to work with Chris and Kathleen Herman and with the program there, and I was really moved by those Chardonnays. And then of course I talked about Morgan Long's wines, and I mean obviously those are like the big cult, big winners, and I was really fortunate to be exposed to those wines. They're kind of right at the ascension of when the world started to get excited about those wines. I don't come from money, and I didn't want to seek out investors. I'm also young. I don't know how to talk to investors or people like that. So I built Amica Luna. We started with 4 barrels, 2 tons. And for most of my vineyards I work with now, I'm still just working with 2 tons of vineyard. And everything, I call it like my bootstraps brand. I was funding that brand exclusively with my salary from the restaurant and from service. And, you know, wine is very famous for having a very long ROI. So I have almost 30 barrels of wine in bulk. I have bottled less than 100 cases of it. So as you can imagine, my cash flow is not exactly there yet, but it's in. Last year, Vitae Springs and Amica Luna combined got to be, I really needed to focus on them full time. It started to become extremely demanding, especially as we're lifting Vitae Springs and kind of really launching the brand and focusing on that brand awareness. We are, I had to quit my job. I quit restaurants in 22, went to more distribution. I worked with a lot of really awesome distributors out here. I always work for more of the local-based distributors, American Northwest, Vertical, and awesome people. And I met awesome people and a lot of people in the industry, and it also helped me build connections with the buyers and the accounts and the people in the industry out here. And that kind of helped kick off a little bit of Vitae Springs' sales too. And then I actually had to quit that job on very, very good terms. I loved working with American Northwest, but because I just didn't have time. I had to focus. Like, harvest was a couple months away at that point, and we had a lot of events going on, and I really just needed to focus on the winery. So last year was actually the first year I transitioned to just full-time. I was always full-time in a sense, but I've been working overtime for the past 5 years or so. So it was the year to make that transition. Yeah. And so Amica Luna is now, I'm about to bottle, until this point, I have only bottled the Eel Springs Vineyard. And so my first 2 vintages. And this year, this next spring, early summer, we'll see where we're at, because I'm not on anyone's schedule, just on my own schedule. I am gonna release the first iteration of the multiple vineyards that I work with. You know, I've been working with Zenith. I'm going on my 3rd year working with them, and I love that property, and working with them has been so great. I'm working with an exciting property down in Elkton. I was working with the Kellers, who are on Xena Hill. I'm working with Mark Royer now, which is a super awesome opportunity, and that started last year. So, you know, a lot of really exciting things in the works. I've already started to get a little bit of excitement for Amica Luna, despite the fact that, you know, I've only really had 1-2 wines available. So this year is actually going to be the first year that I'm really going to do this big push to try and get Amica Luna off the ground. As much as $50 entry-level Chardonnay moves, which, if you know anything about the wine industry, it's not very fast. But it is something that is born out of passion and love for this area, Chardonnay, and a sense of land, and the great Chardonnay winemakers that are here. Is something that I think we can all celebrate. And I think that there's a lot of opportunity. And we've only just begun to peek into the window of the potential for Chardonnay here in the Willamette Valley. And that's why I'm excited about Amica Luna. I went on a little tangent there in the middle, but I got us back.
That honestly should be the tagline of our interviews. It's like, I went on a tangent, but I got there eventually. That's pretty much like that and unfined and unfiltered. That should be the tag. Those are the taglines for our interviews. So let's talk about the future a little bit then. Obviously, you have 2 projects in the kind of growing stages. You mentioned with Vitae Springs that you're sort of seeing how much you can do. So what is the near-term future for Vitae Springs? We'll start with Vitae Springs first. Where do you want to get it to? What are the next steps?
So that's a great question. We actually had this meeting about this yesterday. As far as, you know, Vitae Springs goes, We give really boutique experiences in our tasting barn on the property. And we are leaning more on that a little bit more boutique side, looking at distribution in other states for kind of our entry-level wines. What's interesting about that, though, is we had to price those wines strategically to move, but it's all estate fruit, and it's all made in the same room, and it's all the same quality. It's literally just a blend for the Pinot to be a little bit more approachable in its use. But as far as quality goes, those are going to be incredible values because we're pricing those to kind of get people aware of our wines. Also, I grew up in the Rust Belt, and very blue collar, and I grew up in restaurants. And I want my wine to be available for restaurants and to make sense for restaurants, but I also want it to be available for everyone. I don't want to outprice anyone on my wine. Now, some people can tell me like $32, that's still an expensive bottle of wine. Well, it's Pinot Noir from the Willamette Valley. And it's organic, it's hard to grow. So as far as like cost goes, we really try and we sell some of these wines for just over cost. And that's something that we will continue to do. And that's very important to our brand. So we're moving a lot of those wines. Those are the wines that you can find, we call it just the Willamette Valley. It's all Willamette Valley. It's all grown on Vitae Springs. Like the Willamette Valley Pinot, the Pinot Gris, the Riesling, and we do a Solera style rosé. It's like a modified Solera. It's not like a true Solera. I don't have a bodega, but it's a multi-vintage blend that we blend off every year. And we do try and be as technical as possible. So anyway, the Solera style, it is a very intentional blending too. And so those wines are going to be the ones that are available in retailers and restaurants. We do a lot of focus for on-premise, but a lot of marketing and a lot of just telling people that we're here and telling people that, especially in Salem, that we are a very boutique experience in Salem. We are within the Salem city limits. We're not an urban winery. You're still out on the farm, right? But it is, it's 20 minutes from downtown, 10 minutes from South Salem. It's very, very close by, and we're just really trying to focus on letting people know that we're there, attracting people to our beautiful tasting barn, and then kind of in especially markets that are not Oregon, work on distribution there to try and build our brand. And because the price point is really great and the quality supersedes it. So we're very excited about our growth and our potential. We could scale up a little bit more, but we're never going to be a national brand and still keep the same ethos of Vitae Springs. What makes Vitae Springs so great is that Randy knows and touches every single vine multiple times a year, and we control every quality call from the pruning decisions to the cork closure, right? And we always make the call for what is the best quality. And that's something that as you grow, sometimes you can lose track of. And we never want to have to make that sacrifice. And so that's kind of our main goal and where we see our growth. For Amica Luna, I've been asking myself the same question. Where do I see myself? I'm hoping that, the wines are well received. They're extremely high quality and I think they're beautiful, but, all mothers say this about their children. I have received some very, quote, high scores. I know we don't care about scores in Oregon, but, we have received some pretty high acclaim for at least the first iterations of Amica Luna. And I'm starting to get a lot of excitement, especially in markets that are not Oregon. California, Arizona, some states out on the East Coast. And as far as the market goes, I feel like we'll see where the Oregon market and how it receives it, and we'll see how the national market. And I think it's a loaded question. Where do we see ourselves in the wine industry in 5 years, especially with all of this, political uncertainty and economical uncertainty, and politics aside, wine is down. Wine is down globally. Champagne is down 7 to 10%, depending on who you ask. The consumption is down by over 2%, just generally in the United States, and specific categories are not doing very well. There's distributors all over the nation that have warehouses of wine that they cannot move. So we are in a very interesting times, and we are coming back into a cycle of there's a lot of wine out there, and I think consumers are going to find that they are going to get a lot of really great wine for a very good price if you're keeping your eyes open and paying attention. It might be a little bit more technical of an answer.
It's a great answer. A buyer's market coming.
It's going to be a buyer's market, something that I really liked was like 00 did a glass pour program, and that's something that I've been doing with Amica Luna. I've had marginal success with that for on-premise. I've been loaning out Coravins. I've been trying to get people excited about the wine. I'm trying to get the wine into people's glass. Then we'll see where the market takes it. I could be flexible, I'm going to sell the wine to people who are excited about the wine. There's a big world out there. Someone's going to be excited about it. I'm going to find it. I'm going to find them, so. And like I said, Amica Luna and Vitae Springs combined is about 2,000 cases. In all reality, it is not a lot of wine to sell. So we're going to make it work,
So you mentioned that you're obviously young winemaker, projects just getting started. So what have you not done yet that you want to do? Is there a varietal you want to work with? Is there a region you want to work with?
I'm really excited about Rocks District Shiraz. It's still Oregon, so I'm still being true to Oregon. My Master of Wine mentor is Billo from Rasa Vineyards, and I'm also in the other winemaker, his brother Pinto. I'm going to butcher their last name, but Narvane. They make beautiful, beautiful and exciting iterations. Everyone out there makes beautiful and exciting iterations of Rocks District Shiraz, because it's just, that's the place. It's awesome. If Amica Luna ever decided to go into a brand, so like right now Amica Luna's identity is like Chardonnay, but like I'm still in the infancy of the brand. We could do something a little bit different. Chardonnay and Syrah, Senequan does that all the time, so why can't I? And those are the varieties I'm excited about. Aromatic reds, neutral barrel aged whites. It's like, that's my jam. I would be really excited to make some Rocks District Shiraz. Is it in the wallet? Is it in the books? Not this year. Maybe next year, though. We'll see how my new releases do. Because I have some contacts out there. I have people that I could buy Syrah from. And that's the hardest part, is sourcing someone that will actually sell you the fruit. And the irony is, like, I've been trying to source like really, really excellent fruit from select vineyards I haven't been able to get my hands on, or I have. I'm working with some really exciting vineyards now, but it's taken me a long time to curate this like list of Chardonnay farmers that I want to work with, and vineyards I want to work with. But I already kind of have that for the rocks. We'll see if they're gonna still be there in a few years when I need them, or when I call and I'm like, hey, remember when you said that you would sell me Syrah? Here I am, 3 years later. So I could see us going into that. That's something I'm really excited about in the Valley. It's just economic at this point. We are, my fiance, just excited. My fiance is started Cynic Wines this year, which is 00 brand. He's wanting to make no sans anything in these wines, and something to make truly natural. We always, Randy is a big ambassador for natural wines, and the wines, he made some Viognier, he got some Viognier, some organic Viognier from Croft, and he made a skin contact and a regular white barrel aged, and they're beautiful wines. They're still going through Malik.
So they're going to be in bulk for a little bit longer, but that's something that we're really excited about is the potential to make really, really beautiful natural wines. But honestly, I'm excited about the future of Vitae Springs, and I'm excited about being a part of this brand and building the brand. It's got the market position for Vitae Springs is a lot, I think, safer, and it's really exciting versus Amica Luna, which needs a little bit more time in bottle. We have a little bit more inventory to build up, and so like that's still kind of like in utero, so to speak. But Vitae Springs, I have a good amount of inventory. I'm selling the wines, people are getting excited. All the success for Vitae Springs brings people to Amica Luna in the future. So, and their partners, the Amica Luna tasting room is the Vitae Springs tasting room. I do all my commerce through the Vitae Springs website, which is great. You go to the Amica Luna website and you click the purchase page, it just redirects you to the Vitae Springs page, which is great. I also build the websites, so it's like, that's just on me. But growing the Vitae Springs brand is what I'm most excited about right now, today. If you would have asked me a year ago, I might have said growing the Amica Luna brand or making the Amica Luna wines. Well, I've made 4 vintages of Amica Luna. Most of them are still in barrel, and I think the excitement of that, especially during the cellar season, is a little bit lower as I just wait for them patiently to go through mallow, or if I decide to stop them. I'm tasting them once a month or so to see where they're at. So yeah, that's what I'm excited about.
Right, last question for you. Biggest accomplishment so far? What are you proudest of?
Oh goodness, I'm excited. I am most excited about the quality of wines that are coming out of Amica Luna and Vitae Springs. I got a little bit of, when I first started, I got a little bit of backlash from people saying, oh, you don't have enough experience, or you don't have an enology degree. Like, why are you making wine? Or like, are these wines even going to be good? And, confident me, I'm like, yeah, they're going to be great. But like inside, I'm like, well, I don't know if they're going to be great. Well, we'll see. But for marketing, yeah, they're going to be great. And we're tasting them, and they're outstanding. They're really, really beautiful. And I am, and it took a monumentous amount of effort and faith in myself and confidence that I know what I'm doing. Despite not having a formal education, despite not having worked at 15 harvests. At this point, Rainey and I have about 17 harvests combined worth of experience. So we're in a good place, and we always catch each other. Did you put nitrogen in that pump? Like, are we making sure we're in there? We're always double checking each other, and we bring a lot of really great things to the table, and I think I'm most proud of the quality of wines that we make for Vitae Springs and Amica Luna, and the reception. I'm not just saying that as a mother to her children, but my children being my wines. I have no actual human children of my own. Who needs human children when you have a cellar full of Chardonnay? So, but it's I like to think that I can look at wine from a very objective point of view. I taste wine on a very global scale, and it's really actually robbed me of a lot of the joy. But every time I pick up a glass, I think about like, okay, what's the quality of this wine? How was this wine made? Did it see barrel? Did it I dissect every single glass of wine I drink. Initially, after the second glass, I'm just drinking wine. But initially, and it's important that we do this as winemakers, and it's important that we do this as professionals, because it keeps a sense of typicity. It's important. Wine is important. It's a sense of history and place. So it's important that we keep a sense of typicity, and we are putting our most qualitative thoughts and efforts into preserving it. So I could be a little bit of, jabbing at my own sides here, but it is important, and I do stand by critically analyzing every glass of wine. Whether it is just like, oh, this is a very simple wine, it's a rosé, I'm having it, pairs well with sunshine.
or this is like a very important like Marcel Dice field blend from a Grand Cru vineyard in Alsace that was very intentionally made to be a sense of terroir and a sense of place, one singular little postage stamp of land that requires analysis, you know. I'm proud of being a student of the Masters of Wine. I'd be prouder if I passed my S1 exam, but I'm proud of all the effort and all of the growth. I am proud of the discipline I have and my devotion to the wine industry as a whole, you know. I'm as hopelessly devoted to, you know, Aussie Barossa Shiraz makers that are making awesome, beautiful Shiraz and Rieslings out in Eden Valley. They don't know I'm hopelessly devoted to them, but I am. You know, as well as I'm devoted to, you know, family-owned, tiny little, like, winemakers and houses in Beaujolais and Burgundy. I'm hopelessly devoted to the Willamette Valley wine industry. I find beauty everywhere. There's so much excitement that's going on, and I just wish to be a part of it all. And I think that I'm proud of that devotion, and I'm proud of how hard I work, and I'm proud of, you know, this never-ending pursuit for knowledge and understanding. This is something I'm proud of.
All right, all the questions I have for you. Anything I didn't ask that I should have, or anything that we didn't cover that you want to cover?
Nope, that's me. That was all. That's everything.
That's it?
Yeah.
You're all
I have 5 dogs. I love dogs. I love gardening. I have a little pottery studio in my garage. When I get around to it, sometimes I make pottery. My dogs are my life.
What kind of dogs?
Oh, I'm glad you asked. I have, my oldest is a black lab. Her name is Nova. I have a wonderful little boy, Archer. He's also 10. And he is a German Shepherd, Chesapeake Bay Retriever mix. That was me rubbing his little head. He's about this tall. And he loves to fetch. I have a absolutely wild husky, and she's 2, and she's all of the things that you can imagine a husky to be. She screams, she's mouthy, she has a crazy prey drive. My whole house is covered in her fur. She is the softest and sweetest dog I've ever met in my entire life. But she has a wild side to her, and she's like, if she doesn't want to do something, she'll like verbally tell you like, this is bullshit. It's hilarious. And then I have 2 wonderful and very smart livestock guardian animals. They're 150-pound Anatolian mixes. They're a mix of 4 different livestock breeds, and they're great. They're great animals. Their names are Captain Picard and Alphonse Ulrich. Their names are picked out by Randy. But I'm in full support. I'm a big Trekkie. And when I'm not studying, I'm watching Star Trek for the 1 millionth time.
Which is your favorite?
DS9, that's also another great question. And that might not be the normal answer that you get from people who like Star Trek, but I really love DS9. I've watched it all the way through countless times. I also love The Next Generation. That one's a good one. Yeah, those are my favorites. I'm also getting really into like the newer ones. I'm almost finished with Discovery, and then I've watched Strange New Worlds a few times through. Lower Decks is also great, you know.
Full on Trekkie.
I'm full on Trekkie. Yeah.
This is fantastic. This is like the speed dating part of the interview. We're getting all the information.
What do you like? What are your dogs' names? Something that's really exciting. I run an international exchange program. That's a cultural exchange program. It's through the Worldwide Opportunities on Organic Farms, or WOOF. We're woofers. Randy, my partner, and I, we independently have been woofing in France. That's where we got a lot of our education on vineyards, and we got a lot of really awesome opportunities through that. Since we have both started businesses that we're pretty much tied at the hip to, we can no longer travel. But we decided to become wolf hosts, and not only did we decide to become wolf hosts, we wanted to be the best freaking wolf hosts. We make awesome meals, we try and deliver a really cool educational experience. And for those of us who are listening to the podcast, if you've ever been woofing, 100% do it, but if you've ever been woofing, you know that sometimes you get a farm that's like a little bit like, oh. We try and be like the coolest and most chill and most welcoming farm. We do it. We're incredibly successful in this endeavor. We're a highly requested host spot location, and I've started to get a little picky and with who we accept, and so we've had a lot of success. Getting people who are actually really interested in the wine industry and interested in learning about grapes and interested in learning about what it is to be organic, regenerative, sustainable, and we do woofers for harvest too. We also pay our harvest interns in addition to the woofing thing, they're hosted in my house. I live with woofers, and I have for 3 years. And so my house is filled with people from all over the world, and I have upwards of 5 people living in my home. I live in a beautiful, old, and very large farmhouse that's on the vineyard. It's the old farmhouse. It's built in like the 70s or 80s, and it would be so empty if it was just Randy and I. There's like a whole, like we call it the wing. It's not a wing, but it's like a whole hallway of just like where they had the kids growing up. Well, we don't have kids, but there's like 3 bedrooms down there that we have. I put bunk beds in one of them, and we can house and like a big bed for like for a couple in like the back bedroom, and we house like people. Upwards of like 5. This year we had 13 woofers this summer at one time, because they were like, oh, we just want to camp out for a couple weeks, right? But then we got like some schedules mixed up, so we ended up having like a lot of that at one time, and it was like we had really, really, really a lot of people, but it was a really fun experience. And anyone who has even a passing interest in wine. Or grapes, or even organic viticulture, we welcome them. And even if you're not interested, we host a lot of people who are like freshly 21. That's kind of around that college age when a lot of woofers are. That's like the main demographic of woofers, and so they only have like a very passing interest in wine. They're really in it for the travel and the free room and board. But that's something that's really exciting that we do at Vitae Springs, and sharing knowledge and sharing everything I know. Like I said, I went to the School of Hard Knocks. I don't have any secrets. Everything I know, I learned from someone else, and I'm really excited to pass on the information. So anyone with a passing interest or wine, or even I have a lot of people who are even in the Masters of Wine program with me who are interested in coming in, like, oh, I just want to do harvest for like a week. I'm like, I'll teach you everything I know in that week. Just do it with me. And that's something that we're excited at Vitae Springs that we do. And we've been doing it for 3 years. We could stop at any time, and we've never stopped. And it's something that, yes, it can be overwhelming at times, but it is one of the most rewarding things that we have done as a vineyard and as a couple, as Randy and I do. So
that's amazing.
It is really exciting. It's exciting, and it allows us to travel vicariously through people. We've had people from China, Japan, France, Germany, Portugal, Brazil, like all over the place. And it's allowed us to travel the world vicariously through the people and the connections we make. And I remember every single woofer that's come. We've had nearly 40 It's probably just a rough estimate, and each of them has made a really big impact. Yeah. That's the whole interview, I think.
That's it. Thank you so much for taking the time.
This was awesome.